Thanks, I am. I'm a sort of great believer in the fact that, music really is in places like this, opportunity just to elevate us, to get us to think about different things. And we just tend to go down the tram lines of saying, here are hymns or whatever. But some of the music that we hear in popular music really does have words that make a difference. And I really appreciate the way you choose the words, I am, and just set the context for what we're doing in this particular gathering. Now, I was in an event the other day. It wasn't the garden parties. And someone asked me what I did at the Aspen Chapel. And that actually made me think. I thought, what do I do here? My title is spiritual leader. And I know I have loads of responsibilities from, writing 2,500 words every week, turning up here on a Sundays, making sure the boiler works, dealing with people when they arrive on spec, setting up the tea and coffee, making sure the parking lot gets ploughed in the winter. But, what is the center of all of it? What am I really here for? And I realized the most important thing that I do every day, and really what I'm paid to do here, is my daily practice. That's the most important thing that I do. Because without that daily practice, I have no anchor. And so whatever it is that I do here in the chapel is completely anchored and tied in with that daily practice. And for an hour a day, I give myself over. And actually, I have to ask myself, what exactly am I doing in my daily practice if it's so important? I'm engaging with the deepest part of my life. Yes, that's part of it. I'm opening myself up to a connection that's going to guide all I do and how I present myself to the world. I know that's part of it too. I allow my mind to quieten down and my heart to open up. I'm then feeling for a connection with the essence that's in my life, feeling for my breath, feeling for my heartbeat. In my practice, I'm being aware and I'm sitting and I'm just sensing what's going on around me. But none of that's exactly what I'm doing. Yeah, I'm entering into the present moment as the present moment shows itself to me. And I'm being open to the promptings of my inner spiritual life. But, when it comes down to it, it's all of that, and it's not quite it. I can't put my finger on it because, as it says in the Tao Te Ching, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. You can't really describe what it is you're doing when you're involving yourself in the innermost secrets of your life. The Hindus, they have an expression in Sanskrit, which is neti neti, which means it's neither this nor that. It's neither this nor that. And there's a general understanding in all the sort of world religions that whatever it is we're doing in those deep moments, we don't really understand what it is. What I am doing is opening up myself to a connection that actually I won't recognize, even when I make that connection. But I'm trusting that it has been made. And then after I do that, I then go about my life waiting for the results of that connection to make themselves known. So there has to be a not knowingness in one's engagement. We're talking about God, the ground of all being, spiritual life. We can't know exactly what we do when we attempt to make that connection. I come out of my practice not with a certain understanding that a connection has been made, but a knowledge that what I do with that connection, I have a trust that because I've given myself to that moment, that there has been a connection and that it will shape my life. So that trust is an important aspect in one's spiritual life. Often in a spiritual life, you sit there and they think, well, what's going to happen? Am I going to experience a great moment of enlightenment? Is God going to speak to me? And we're expecting all those things. We're wanting all those things. But actually, you have to be a blank canvas. You have to not know even how that connection is being made. I then take on trust the fact I've made that connection. And I make the best I can with that connection moment by moment. I sit down at my computer and actually, words come to me. I'll then go into a meeting and I'll wait for a prompting to say something. I'll go about my day looking for the appropriate response to what comes my way. And it's all from that trust that I am in contact, even if I felt it or not. I wait for ideas and responses to come. So the essence of my job here is really quite simple. It's opening myself to a connection with that which is essential in life, and then taking the effect of that connection into everything that happens in my life. Now, that's not in my job description, as Bruce will tell you, but it should be. That's really what my job description should be. That's what I think makes me a spiritual leader. And in being a spiritual leader, it's not about directing traffic. Saying do this, do that, or it's not about that sort of thing. Or it's not even planning a roadmap as to where, is the chapel we should be going next. That's not my job. I shouldn't be doing that. It's about being open to a connection and then responding to life in a way that enables those around me to take a lead from my response. It's about responding and then hoping people around me might take a lead. All that I'm really doing in these talks is to provide a suggested context for life based upon the context that I've glimpsed from the connection that I've made in my spiritual life, in my prayer life. I'm really saying, life looks very much like this at the moment. How does it look to you? That's really what I'm saying every week. And in doing that, I'm offering a context that you can either explore for yourself or not. So, my life is about, going into my practice, trusting that I'm going to make a connection, enabling myself just to respond in the moment, and just hoping that people, are able to look at their lives in a certain way. For me, it's a process of connecting. And we're really talking about, what's our spiritual life about? It's about connecting with a flow that's within me. It's connecting with a flow that's within me and attempting to express that flow in my life through my actions and my words. That's really what I'm attempting to do now. I'm attempting just to express a flow that's within me. And in that sense, the leadership, spiritual leadership is really about how to be rather than what to do. It's about how to be rather than what to do. There are times when doing does come into it, obviously. However, each action we take, we all do the doings in our lives, but each action that each of us takes is so personal and so bound up with the circumstances that we all find ourselves in. And those circumstances are different for each one of us, that to suggest what to do is much less useful than to suggest how to be. Yes, there are obviously advantages in being kind and being considerate and not taking advantage of people and even loving our enemies. But these are so vague as to almost qualify as ways of being rather than ways of doing. Much more helpful is to look at how to be rather than what to do. And I think that's what I'm paid for here. I'll have to ask Bruce afterwards whether that is the case. I'm paid to be out of a connection that I'm making with the essence of life. It is almost monastic. In monasteries, the monks have one real task, and that's to pray. Everything else is to enable prayer, or is responsible for what's happened in prayer. Oh, I like the thing, I've said this many times before, that lovely thing when someone asked one of your spiritual leaders, how often they prayed. And they say, well, I pray for half an hour every day, unless I'm really busy. And if I'm really busy, I pray for an hour. And I think that really sums up how one's emphasis should be. Really, that's what I'm paid to do here, to set my life up, to enable a connection to be made with the divine, and then act out of that connection. It's almost shamanistic in its way. It's of life being a dance with the spiritual connection being at the center. We all have our part to play in that dance as we join hands as a community. But at some point, it's rooted in the essence of life. And from there, each of us responds in the way that we feel appropriate. My role is not to be that connection with the divine. My role is not to be that connection with the divine and, offer it out to those around me. No, my role is to show that this connection with the divine is the essence of how to live life to the full, and to encourage others around me to make that connection too, so that their lives can be similarly informed by the wisdom that's at the center of all things. So my role is to encourage you to find that center. It's interesting in church life, particularly in the past, the priest is often seen as the connection with the divine. You've got to be in contact with the priest, and therefore you're in contact. Completely the wrong way around. The connection exists within you, and it's you searching for that connection. All I can do is to encourage you. If what I do has any value, it is through educating, through drawing out. The Latin word for educare, to draw out. It's that drawing out that connection with the divine from within those around me. I'm not here to tell you what to do. Only you can decide that. I'm here to give you an example of how to be, and sometimes how not to be. Because we don't always get it right. I sometimes do what I shouldn't do. And you have to be discerning. You can't always, say, oh, he's always... No, I'm not. I mess up a lot of the time. I'm here to say that there is a deep wisdom within the universe that is available to everyone. That each of us has a connection with that deep wisdom. And by the way, if you don't have a connection with the deep wisdom, then you wouldn't be here. Because it's that deep wisdom which keeps you alive. It tells your heart to beat. It has your body breathe. And it enables all the neurons to work properly. That deep wisdom is what you're plugged into. And like electricity, it makes you go. That's what makes you go. I once did I don't do it here, but in England, you do school assemblies, whereas the priest, you go along to a school and you talk about God and stuff like that. And I once came in connected to an electric cord. Like that. And I said, everyone is connected to an electric cord, which is that deep wisdom. And that's the truth. We're all connected. Now, in life, you can just leave it there and enjoy all that life is giving you. But if you are connected, surely the next logical step is not just to take it for granted, but to try and make an even deeper connection with that wisdom that's making you go, that's keeping you alive. A connection that goes beyond just acknowledging it as being the root of our aliveness, but attempts to open channels that will enable the efficacy of that wisdom to be demonstrated in the way that we live our lives. It's like when you plug a device into a computer, right? Analogy coming up. When you plug a device into a computer, You can just do that to recharge your device, right? Or you can allow the software within the computer to drive the device by downloading processing power and content in the device. It can be either a charging mechanism, or it can take the information from the computer, music, whatever it is, and can have that move through the device. To just live without trying to connect with the source of our being is just to charge our bodies and just carry on living. To consciously connect with that wisdom is to download the processing power and the content of that wisdom. And to find out how to do that is what we call spirituality. That is what we do. That's what spirituality is. It's working out how the processing is working and what the content is. That's why some religions don't like spirituality. Because actually it puts you in control. It puts you in the driving seat. They just want you to believe what they want you to believe. They don't want you to get involved in your own process of it. No. That's what spirituality is. The cultivation, this is the definition we use, Rowan Williams, the cultivation of a sensitive and rewarding relationship with eternal truth and love. The cultivation of a sensitive and rewarding relationship with eternal truth and love. That's what we're doing with spirituality. Spiritual leadership is about how we cultivate that sensitive and rewarding relationship with eternal truth and love. That's what religion should be about. They say believe in Jesus, follow the Quran, observe the Torah. These are ways of setting our being on the path to downloading the processing power and content. And in religions, the problem comes when those who control the ways and means of each religion use those ways and means for their own power and self-aggrandizement. That's when problems happen in religion. When people use the position they have to actually create their own power. Religion has always had a strange relationship with power. And they are not good bedfellows, religion and power, as their offspring of the two coming together is often corruption. The offspring of the bedfellow of religion and power is often corruption. I spoke a few weeks ago about the word corruption coming from the Latin word cor, which means altogether, and rompere, which means to break. So to be corrupt is to break something that was formerly together. That's where the word comes from. To break something was formerly together. The integrity of spirituality is broken by the introductions of power structures into the mix. So that just putting that whole context in there. For me, the essence of spirituality, the essence of it is mysterious. That's why I don't really know, if I've made a connection. I just have to trust that. We don't know how it works. It says in the Bible many times, these things are too wonderful for me. That's how it describes it in the Bible. That's the same way of saying netty, netty, not this, not that, and the tower that is told is not the eternal tower. They are two. We can't know how spirituality works. There's no point in saying that we can. It is mystical in the sense that mysticism is the art of union with reality. It's mystical, we know that, because mysticism is the art of union with reality. It is personal, in that each of us is facing different circumstances, and we all have a different perspective as to how to approach these circumstances. So it's mystical, it's personal, and I think it is loving, in that it is given to us with no expectation of return. We're not presented a bill at the end of it, and we are asked to put it back in the world with no expectation of return. It's loving, it's personal, and it's mystical. Each of us has the opportunity of either expressing our minds, our wonderful thoughts that we've had as we live off the charge that's within us, or the alternative of consciously trying to make that connection and allow something more profound to come through and to guide us. And there is the first step that we make to get the process going. The first step that we make, and we're really talking about how do we get the process of spirituality going. The first step that we make to get the process of spirituality going is we have to make a decision that this is what we're going to do in our life. We have to decide that spirituality is important. It is the decision to embark on the spiritual journey. It has to be made, that decision. You can't just go along, think, oh, well, that's nice. You know, I always said that, if you just go along, I end up just doing what I would call spiritual stand-up. I'm just sort of rabbiting, oh, that's very nice, let's have a cup of coffee, I mean, there's no point in spiritual stand-up. It's just another part of the entertainment industry. You've got to make a decision to embark on a spiritual journey. And you can see these decisions. In Christian terms, that's what baptism is. Baptism is a decision to include the spiritual in our lives. It happens. The godparents say it on behalf of it. If people get baptized later in life, they're saying, this is what's important to me. Each religion has an equivalent. It might be a bar mitzvah or some sort of initiation that indigenous people often like to do, or vision quest. A decision has to be made. Each of those is a statement that there is a spiritual element to life and a commitment to follow it. That's the first step. Even the foundation of this chapel has that written into its mission. This chapel was set up as a testament to remind peoples in Aspen that there is foremost a spiritual dimension to our existence. That's one of our founding statements. So it is to help with that decision. So the first step is the decision to pursue that wisdom. And chances are, by the very fact that you're here, you've made that step. I mean, the very fact you've turned up today and are watching online is you've made that step. The next step is one of declaring an intention to have that wisdom come into our lives. You've got to say, I want this to come into my life. It's a statement of willingness. I did one of those old-style Earhart seminar training seminar. Who's done one of those seminars? Anyone? Yeah, various people have done this, yeah. And in those seminars, they're sort of enlightenment seminars that last 3 days, you're always asked in the one that I did, you're asked 3 qualifying questions. And the 3 qualifying questions that you're asked at the beginning of these seminars are, 1, are you willing to be willing? That's the first question. They don't let you on the seminars unless you... Are you willing to be willing? Second question, are you willing to derive value from the experience? That's the second question. And the third question, are you willing to do whatever is necessary to get the result? Those are the 3 questions you're asked. And there's only ever one answer to those questions, and that's yes. If, any other answer that comes back, then you do it again. So if you ask the person, and I've done the training bit, so I've had to, if you say, are you willing to be willing? And they say, oh, well, that depends on, blah, 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 blah. Then you simply say, thank you. Are you willing to be willing? And you just go on until they finally just say, yes. And it is and you can use those, in one spiritual life. Are you willing to be willing in our lives? Yeah, I'm willing to. Are you willing to derive value from the experience? Are you willing to do whatever is necessary to get the result? And then we can move on. We have to make that statement of willingness about the spiritual aspect of our lives and then be willing to follow through. And the next step is setting up the infrastructure. So we've made we've said it's important. We've said that we're willing, to do whatever is necessary. And the next step is to set up the infrastructure to make the connection that we're seeking. There's no point in just saying that we want a spiritual connection and then carrying on if nothing has changed. We have to put in the infrastructure for the connection to take place. And that is our spiritual practice. The decision to have a spiritual practice in your life, even if it's 3 minutes of meditation a day, is the key decision in putting in that infrastructure. There's a lovely couple of quotes from the Sufi messages. This is from the Sufi messages. I searched but could not find thee. I called thee aloud, standing on the minaret. I rang the temple bell with the rising and setting of the sun. I bathed in the Ganges in vain. I came back from Kaaba disappointed. I looked for thee on earth. I searched for thee in heaven, my beloved. But at last I have found thee, hidden as a pearl in the shell of my heart. And the second Sufi, which follows on realization, is, it is not by self-realization that man realizes God. It is not by self-realization that man realizes God. It is by God realization that man realizes the self. It is by God realization, and it is the pearl within our hearts. That is what we do. That is what we set up. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to do anything, travel all over the place. No, it is within our hearts. All of us here have a spiritual practice. I know that because you just turning up here is, in a sense, a spiritual practice. Even if you do this once a week, that is a spiritual practice. It doesn't matter what it is, your spiritual practice. It is being here is part of that. It could be reading a book. It could be going on a course, seeing a film, having a conversation. It could be meditation. It is us giving that deep wisdom house room. You've got to give that deep wisdom house room in our lives. It is in that, it is the root of who we are. And we simply have to make ourselves less and make that more. And it helps to take on some form of practice for all this stuff to have any meaning. It's that old thing, it's like being a sailing ship on the sea, and you're bobbing around, you think, well, why is nothing happening? I'm a spiritual being, nothing's happening. The reason nothing's happening is because you haven't got any sails up. In a sailing ship, you've got to put up the sails. And when you put up the sails, as Andy will know, he's just come back from sailing, then the wind catches your sails and it will take you somewhere. And we got sailors here, haven't we? We've got Bill just come back from sailing. The fact is, you've got to put up your sails in order for that to happen. And that's what the spiritual practice is all about. And we have to trust where the wind takes us. We have to trust that we're being taken in the right place. That's why that old saying, it's difficult to say this in Aspen, that old saying that a rich man is less likely to enter the kingdom of heaven than a camel thread through the eye of a needle. That's because when you've got enough money, what happens is that when your circumstances take you in a certain way, you think, well, I'm not going here. I'll just throw a couple of grand in there and I'll take myself in a different direction. You're in charge of the direction that you take. You make the direction yourself. Being in that spiritual life, you give up to that direction. There's a sense of allowing yourself to be taken. And it's difficult not to think, no, I'm not going there. No, I'm not going into the middle. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. I want to go in a different sort of direction. We have to trust where the wind takes us. Our spiritual practice is what we do to enable that deep wisdom to enrich our lives. Any activity can take the form of spiritual practice as long as you've decided you're going to use it for that purpose. I'm nearly at the end, so don't panic. If you decide my walk is my spiritual practice, that works. You have to make the decision that you're going to use it. Washing up can be a spiritual practice if you use it in that way. Sometimes we set up circumstances to make it happen, and that is our practice. It could be meditation or chanting or dance. We won't be doing liturgical dance later on today, but maybe another time. But many things we have. It's just deliberately saying, I'm setting aside this time to enable that deep wisdom to come through me more powerfully, and you engage. Not with the idea that there's going to be a massive change or a flash of enlightenment, but because we know that that wisdom is there and we open ourselves up to be guided by it. We trust that's happening. The trust is involved. And there is an intention to give up to that greater wisdom rather than just being led by our minds. These are the first steps that we take. They involve both making something happen and also letting something happen. And this is the work of living. This practice, this allowing the wisdom to come through, is the work of living. The work of living a life rooted in the deep wisdom of the universe. And next week, we're going to look at how that plays out in everyday life.